In this video, we'll be taking a look at 4 college basketball games happening on February 9th, 2026, and providing you with free team picks and total picks for each one of those games, so 8 picks in total. Welcome back to Cash Out Sports. Let's dive right into it. Oh, and don't forget to subscribe and to click the bell icon to get notified as soon as these videos get released, so that you have more time to plan out your bets as we provide these videos on a daily basis. I can guarantee that you'll have all the important information that you'll need on these 4 college basketball games after fully watching this video. One more thing before we start. If you would like to gain access to our best exclusive sports picks to take your journey to the next level, then check out our Patreon in the link down below, where we offer our best single picks, parlay picks, and much more. Now let's get started. Xavier versus St. John's. Madison Square Garden on a Monday night feels less like a neutral court and more like St. John's home base, and that changes the whole temperature of this matchup right away. You get a father coaching on one sideline, Rick Pitino, and his son Richard on the other, and that little family subplot quietly cranks up the competitive heat for everyone in the building. St. John's rolls in playing like a group that finally realized it can throw its weight around, riding a 9-game heater and fresh off smacking a top-ranked UConn team in this same building, which is not exactly a small thing. Xavier shows up grinding through the schedule, sitting under the break-even mark in conference play and carrying the sting of a recent blowout loss to that same UConn squad, which can either humble you or rattle you, and sometimes a bit of both. The way St. John's plays right now just has a certain edge to it. They are not a team that waits around and politely runs half-court sets for 30 seconds. They press, they swarm the ball, they attack the lane early in possessions, and they crash the offensive glass like it owes them money. That style wears on opponents, especially over 40 minutes, because it is not just about one hot shooting night, it is about constant noise and pressure that keeps coming. It is the kind of approach that travels, but it especially pops when the crowd is behind it, and you know the Garden reacts to energy plays like blocked shots and putback dunks almost as much as it does to deep threes. The first meeting between these two teams this season still hangs over this one like a reminder. Xavier actually came out swinging at home, built a big lead, and for a long stretch looked like the more composed side. Tree Carroll went off for a huge scoring night and turned that game into his personal showcase, and St. John's had to crawl all the way back just to steal it late. That kind of performance gets burned into a coach's mind, especially a coach like Pitino who thrives on using those little slights as fuel. So you can almost picture the film sessions, St. John's staff rewinding those Carroll buckets again and again, tightening matchups, talking about help angles, and basically saying, "This is not happening the same way in our house." There is also the quiet little historical note hanging in the background. Rick Pitino is right there near Roy Williams on the on-court wins list, trying to move past him, and milestones like that matter to veteran coaches even when they pretend they do not. Add that to a nationally ranked team trying to prove it is not just on a cute run but belongs in the conversation with the big boys, and it sets up less like a sleepy league game and more like a chance to put another stamp on the resume. St. John's has already shown in this building that it can run quality opponents off the floor, taking care of teams like Marquette, Creighton, and UConn with room to spare. Xavier, on the other hand, leans heavily on its offense with Carroll leading the charge, but the trade-off has been a defense that gives up plenty of clean looks and struggles to string together stops. When that kind of defense crosses paths with an aggressive, deep, and confident St. John's group that is fully comfortable playing with pace, the matchup tilts toward the side that can keep its foot on the gas without breaking its structure. As our first pick for this matchup, the St. John's Red Storm to cover the spread as favorites is our full game side pick. St. John's is comfortable living in the 80s on a regular night, and that is not strictly about bombing away from deep. They push the ball, they create extra chances through offensive rebounds, and they turn turnovers into instant points. Their three-point shooting has steadily climbed into a healthy range, which stretches the floor just enough to open driving lanes and dump offs. You almost feel the rhythm when they get going, one transition bucket turning into another, then into a corner three, and suddenly a close game becomes a track meet without anyone calling a timeout fast enough. Xavier absolutely plays a part in that story. On one hand, they have their own offense that sits in that mid to high 70s range most nights, powered by Carroll and several guards who are not shy about pulling the trigger. On the other hand, their defense gives up almost as much as they score, which is a rough combination when facing an aggressive group that loves to crank the tempo. When Xavier falls behind, they tend to lean into pace rather than slowing things down, firing threes early in possessions and trusting their shot making to keep them afloat. That mentality keeps them dangerous, but it also keeps the clock from bleeding and the total from creeping down. The first clash between these two teams already gave us a blueprint. That game turned into a full-on scoring fest, soaring past the number with room to spare, even though St. John's started flat and had to spend a big chunk of the night just fighting back into it. If you imagine a version of this rematch where St. John's comes out sharper at home, gets its press cooking earlier, and forces Xavier into hurry-up mode even sooner, the pace only intensifies. The Red Storm will welcome that kind of chaos, and Xavier will likely respond by running with them and trusting their own offense instead of trying to win a slow, grinding battle that does not really fit their personality. So you get this picture of two teams leaning into tempo, living with some defensive breakdowns, and letting the game breathe instead of squeezing every possession. As our second pick for this matchup, over the projected total is our full game total pick. North Carolina State versus Louisville. This matchup feels like one of those Atlantic Coast Conference nights where the gym is already humming before the ball even goes up. Louisville gets the comfort of that KFC Yum center floor again, and lately that place has felt more like a stage than just a court, with the crowd feeding every little run, and the players clearly leaning into that energy. Pat Kelsey has them playing a style that fits that environment almost perfectly. The Cardinals roll out a backcourt that can stretch the floor, put the ball on the deck, and keep the spacing clean, and then they mix in wings and forwards who crash the glass and finish through contact instead of shying away from it. Guys like Ryan Conwell and Mikel Brown Jr. keep the ball hopping, Isaac McNeely gives them a constant threat behind the arc, and Sananda Frew and Javon Hadley bring that physical edge that makes every loose ball feel like a small collision. It is not just about star power either. The rotation is deep enough that Louisville can keep sending fresh legs at you, which matters a lot when the game drifts into that up-tempo rhythm for most of the night. NC State walks in with a very different kind of confidence, the kind that comes from knowing you can erase almost any deficit in just a few trips if the shots fall. Under Will Wade, this group loves to push the ball, spread the floor, and let shooters live with aggressive decisions. You see it in the way Darian Williams, Quader Copeland, Paul McNeil Jr., and Ben Allen Lubin attack. There is a belief that if they keep firing from deep and getting downhill in transition, the scoreboard will eventually tilt their way. That style looks incredible when the perimeter shots are flowing, and honestly, it can rattle an opponent for long stretches because every semi-open three feels dangerous. The flip side is that a perimeter-driven approach tends to magnify the little details that Louisville happens to handle well at home. When NC State misses, Louisville has the bodies to finish the possession on the glass instead of giving up long rebounds that fuel more transition looks. On the other end, the Cardinals are comfortable getting to the foul line, taking their time in half-court sets, and forcing the visiting defense to work for full possessions instead of trading quick shots. Even with NC State playing its best basketball of the season, and even with that offense absolutely capable of stealing momentum, the matchup leans toward the home side when you mix in the Cardinals' rebounding edge, their reliable half-court execution, and a building where they have piled up a record like 18-2 in their last 20 home dates. Add in that Louisville comes in healthy in the main rotation, while NC State is still missing depth forwards Jerry Dang and Colt Langdon, and it starts to feel like the kind of night where the home favorite is more likely to keep its cushion when things get tense in the final few minutes. As our first pick for this matchup, the Louisville Cardinals to cover the spread as favorites is our full game side pick. North Carolina State brings a scoring profile that screams modern college hoops, pace, spacing, a green light from deep, and enough playmaking to keep the ball from sticking. They have been living with nights where double-digit made threes are almost expected, and when that happens, the whole game starts to feel like a rhythm drill where both teams go back and forth, almost like a high-level open gym. Louisville, on the other hand, is not exactly shy about joining that kind of shootout. They have their own track record of putting up big numbers, and their three-point volume means that even a modest hot stretch can send the scoreboard jumping several possessions ahead in just a couple of minutes. Here is the thing, it is not just that both teams can score, it is that both of them are comfortable letting the other side take a lot of threes too. Neither defense is built around smothering the arc and turning the game into a slog, which matters a lot when you are talking about whether a game settles into the 70s or drifts into the 80s and beyond. If you have watched either team lately, you know how quickly things can escalate. A missed rotation, a couple of careless closeouts, and suddenly there are 4 or 5 threes on the board before anyone has even thought about calling a timeout. Recent form nudges the same direction. North Carolina State has stacked up wins with box scores that almost read like NBA totals, repeatedly getting into the 80s and even higher. and Louisville has answered with its own double-digit scoring bursts, including that recent stretch of wins over SMU, Notre Dame, and Wake Forest where the offense kept humming regardless of venue. Analytics models that project this matchup tend to land in that sweet spot where both teams finish somewhere in the low 80s, which lines up cleanly with what we have seen from them over the full season: high-level shot making, plenty of possessions, and only occasional scoring droughts. There is always a path where one team goes cold or the whistle gets tight and the pace slows, but these two coaching staffs have shown they are comfortable playing fast, trusting their guards, and letting the game breathe instead of squeezing every possession. In a packed Atlantic Coast Conference building, under the lights, with both sides carrying top-tier scoring numbers and a real comfort bombing from deep, this has all the ingredients of a game where the scoreboard stays busy from tip to final horn. As our second pick for this matchup, over the projected total is our full game total pick. Oregon versus Indiana. Assembly Hall on a Monday night has a certain feel to it, and Oregon walking in here just 48 hours after emptying the tank at Purdue makes this matchup feel even heavier than the records alone suggest. Indiana comes in sitting at 16-8 overall with a 7-6 mark in Big Ten play, while Oregon arrives at 8-15 and just 1-11 in the league. And that gap is not just about talent, it is about how these two teams are handling the grind of this season right now. Darian DeVries has quietly turned Indiana into one of those home teams that feels heavier than the box score, with an offense that lives in the low 80s, a defense that usually holds people in the low 70s, and a style that keeps stacking small advantages until they suddenly look up and have some breathing room on the scoreboard. It is not smoke and mirrors either. The Hoosiers share the ball, move bodies, and force opponents to defend for the full clock, which can feel like trying to guard a pickup team that never gets tired. Lamar Wilkerson has become the late-game closer, Tucker DeVries stretches the floor as a big shot maker, Connor Enright keeps the pace steady, and Sam Alexis gives them that interior presence that lets everyone else stay aggressive on the perimeter without worrying that the paint will fall apart behind them. The cool part is that none of that requires them to play at a breakneck tempo. They are comfortable winning possessions with strength and angles, which is often exactly how you want to attack a tired visiting team. Indiana has not been fully healthy all year, and there have been stretches where the injury list looked like a full second lineup. But for this stretch of the schedule, the main minute eaters are on the floor, and that matters a lot more than how many names flash across the pregame availability graphic. You can feel it in the way DeVries is using his rotation, trusting that core group to absorb heavy minutes against Wisconsin in overtime, then turning right around and asking for another hard effort here at home because the chemistry is tight and the roles are clear. On the other side, Oregon is in that spot every fan recognizes, where the team plays just well enough to make you believe again. Then the record on the screen reminds you how long the climb back actually is. The Ducks just pushed Purdue and Mackey, had a real chance to steal it, and still walked out with another loss, which makes this a quick turnaround road game after an emotional near miss against a top program. Stretch that out across the whole season and you see the full picture: an offense that is okay but not special, and a defense that gives up a little too much, with overall efficiency numbers sitting in that good effort, not enough stop zone that can be brutal when you live on the road. The injury situation has not exactly been kind to Oregon either. Losing Jackson Shelstad, your primary ball handler, for essentially the rest of the season because of a hand injury changes the entire feel of the offense, especially late in games when someone needs to calm things down and get you into your stuff. Add in Ige Demir being declared out for the season with a shoulder issue, and Devin Pryor sidelined by a groin injury for an extended stretch, and suddenly that rotation looks much thinner than it did on paper back in October, with more weight falling on guys like Takai Simpkins and Sean Stewart to do a little bit of everything every night. Honestly, that is where the matchup really starts to tilt. Indiana can keep throwing fresh ball handlers and wings at you, mixing size and skill, while Oregon is leaning heavily on a shorter set of creators who now have to travel into one of the loudest gyms in the country on short rest, after a game where they were asked to carry a huge load on both ends. You know that feeling when a road team hangs around for 30 minutes, then one run, one charge call, one big three just snaps the rope and the whole thing unravels. This setup has a lot of those ingredients, with Indiana's depth, physicality, and half-court execution all pointing toward the same direction against a Ducks group that has to prove it can finish strong in a hostile setting rather than just compete for stretches. As our first pick for this matchup, the Indiana Hoosiers to cover the spread as favorites is our full-game side pick. Oregon just played in that grinding but quietly high-leverage game at Purdue, and even though the final score landed in the 60s, the Ducks showed how quickly things can open up when their shooters get loose for a few trips and when an opponent starts trading trips to the line for clean stops. They are not a polished offensive machine, but they are scrappy, and they have enough perimeter firepower to create those little bursts where you look up and they have strung together 3 or 4 scoring possessions in a row, even if they cool off just as fast. Indiana, on the other hand, likes to live in a scoring lane that is very friendly to an active scoreboard. The Hoosiers average in the low 80s on offense while giving up just north of 70, so a typical night for them naturally settles in around the low 150s, and that is before you add in the emotional swings that come with a raucous Assembly Hall crowd. Their passing game is the key. The ball does not stick, and when that ball is pinging from side to side, Alexis is catching on the roll, and Wilkerson is hunting mismatches. The defense is forced into rotation after rotation, which tends to create open threes or free throws, and both of those are friendly to a rising total. There is a funny tension with this Indiana team. They are built with enough defensive toughness to grind you, but the way they score in bunches often drags games into higher totals anyway. Think about that wild finish against Wisconsin, or the shootout flavor of the Washington game earlier in Big Ten play, where even with some rough patches, they still push the combined points into a range that feels more like a track meet than an old-school rock fight. Once the crowd gets going and Indiana starts stacking layups and rhythm jumpers, the opposing side usually has only 2 answers: push the ball back at them or foul, and both of those answers tend to help the number climb. Oregon's defensive profile basically feeds that pattern. Across the season, they have allowed more points than they score, sit in the lower half of the country in defensive efficiency, and have a habit of putting opponents on the free throw line a bit too often, which is the kind of weakness that shows up late when a game gets stretched and both teams are playing the foul and clock game. If the Ducks find themselves chasing, even slightly, you can picture that final 5 minutes turning into a long string of whistles, quick possessions, and what feels like bonus scoring on a night that already wants to lean toward a healthy combined total. Here is the thing, even if the first few minutes feel jittery or both teams start a little tight, the combination of Indiana's passing, Oregon's need to be aggressive to stay in touch, and the way both offenses can generate streaks suggests that the scoring pace has multiple paths to stay lively for most of the 40 minutes. Sometimes you get a game where one team imposes its will and slows everything to a crawl. This does not quite look like that kind of matchup, especially with Oregon coming in battle-tested from that Purdue game and Indiana comfortable playing with tempo spikes at home. As our second pick for this matchup, over the projected total is our full game total pick. Arizona versus Kansas. Arizona walks into Allen Fieldhouse as the unbeaten #1 team in the country, sitting at 23-0 overall and 10-0 in Big 12 play, fresh off that 37-point beatdown of Oklahoma State where the Cowboys barely scratched 25% shooting and got pushed around on the glass. Kansas shows up looking very different from the slightly shaky version we saw early in the season, riding a 7-game surge into this one, now at 18-5 overall and 8-2 in the league after stacking wins over Texas Tech and Utah back-to-back. It feels a bit wild that the undefeated group is coming in as the road favorite while the home team in this story is Kansas inside Allen Fieldhouse, a building that usually treats visiting teams like a stress test. And yet the gap between how the market views Arizona and how Kansas has been playing lately is exactly what gives this matchup some real juice. Bill Self still has that spotless home Big Monday record sitting at 38-0, and this night fits right into that myth around him, almost like another chapter already half written. He just watched Arizona steal the Big 12 mark that used to belong to Kansas for best start to a season, so there is a bit of pride wrapped into this, even if nobody says it out loud on camera. Arizona already walked into this same building at the end of last season and walked out with a win, and Kansas as a program is still sitting at 0-5 at home against teams ranked #1. So there is this clash between what history says and what this particular Kansas run feels like. You can almost hear how that crowd that once set a noise record is going to treat this like something between a Final Four game and a grudge match, standing from the tip and reacting to every whistle like it matters in March. Arizona comes in as the shinier headline, sitting at the top of the standings with that national title buzz swirling and a rotation that just keeps throwing fresh legs at you in waves. Kansas, though, is playing with that quiet edge teams get when they feel the number next to their name is not matching how they are actually performing. They fought through a brutal schedule, stumbled early, then started to stack wins, and now they get to be the side catching points in a building that almost never sees that happen for the home team. In a way, it almost flips the script. The undefeated team carries the pressure and the narrative, while the group in their own gym gets to lean on comfort, routine, and 16,000 people who think every rim bounce belongs to them. Honestly, when you put together Kansas finding its stride, the energy in that arena, the way Self treats these home Monday nights like his own personal stage, and the fact that the line still leans toward the perfect record on the other side, the more appealing angle becomes the home dog that has been hardened by this schedule and is peaking at the right time. As our first pick for this matchup, the Kansas Jayhawks to cover the spread as underdogs is our full game side pick. Arizona's offense is humming along at a level that feels like it belongs in a highlight reel almost every night, sitting around 89 points per game with field goal numbers north of 51%, which is what happens when a team gets good looks and finishes them consistently. They vacuum up rebounds too, roughly 44 a night, which puts them near the very top of the country and means a lot of extra possessions, a lot of second chances, and not many trips where the other side is one and done. That kind of constant pressure on the rim wears on a defense because every good first stop can still turn into a scramble if Arizona tracks down the miss. Kansas does not put up quite the same raw scoring numbers, but they live in that sweet spot for a higher scoring game, hanging around 78 points a night with a field goal percentage that sits in the top 50 nationally. They have shown they can still get efficient looks even when the defense in front of them is solid, which matters in a game like this where nothing feels easy on paper. When you step back and compare the matchup, Arizona's offense ranks near the top of Division I in both points and shooting percentage, and Kansas counters with a defense that is also in that top tier at limiting both of those things. Flip it around, and Kansas brings an offense that can score in rhythm against an Arizona defense that is elite on paper, but that same defense has already allowed several good Big 12 offenses to reach the mid-70s or even the 80s before completely locking up Oklahoma State. We have seen plenty of Arizona games where both sides end up in the 70s or 80s by the final buzzer, and this pairing fits that same kind of template. Stylistically, neither team really wants a slow, ugly rock fight. Arizona just ran Oklahoma State off the floor with 54 points in the paint and has out-rebounded every opponent this season, which screams constant attacks at the rim and putbacks that keep the scoreboard busy. Kansas holds the label of being the league's worst offensive rebounding team, which sounds harsh, but even with that tag, they still sit around +6 in paint points over the season and have been even more productive in that area during Big 12 play. That tells you they still get to the cup, still manufacture free throws, and still find ways to get close looks even if they are not crashing the glass in classic fashion. Then you layer in the schedule piece. Both teams are coming off Saturday wins, which can leave legs just a bit heavy on defense while emotions stay sky high for a matchup like this. If that undefeated run for Arizona really gets tested on the road here and we end up with a tight game late, the combination of pressure possessions, quick shots, and the usual late-game fouling can throw gasoline on the scoring in the final minute or two. The projected total is already sitting in a higher scoring range, and with two high-level offenses, strong efficiency numbers on both sides, and a national spotlight setting that usually brings out the best shot making, this shapes up far more like an NBA-style showcase than a grind-heavy Big 12 slugfest, even if there will be a few defensive stretches that remind you how tough these teams can be. The numbers in the matchup rhythm point toward plenty of points, and while nothing is guaranteed, the most logical script has both teams trading blows on the scoreboard rather than getting stuck in long, dry spells. As our second pick for this matchup, over the projected total is our full game total pick. That's all for now, so if you have any other games you would like reviewed, then leave a comment down below with the game you would like analyzed, subscribe to our channel, leave a like on this video, and we'll get to it as soon as we possibly can. We would also love to hear your opinion on the picks presented to you in this video, whether you agree or disagree with them, so leave a comment down below and do let us know.